What would you do if you found a man unconscious in the trash, bleeding and broken, with no name, no memory, just a ring worth more than everything you've ever owned? Ivy didn't ask questions. She saved him, fed him, sheltered him, loved him, without ever knowing he was a billionaire who'd vanished without a trace. But when the truth came out, everything changed. Because the man she saved wasn't just running from danger. He was running from himself. So take a breath, lean in, and listen closely. This is the story of a woman who gave everything, and a man who almost lost it all. The rain in New Camden didn't just fall. It soaked, crept, and clung. Ivy knew its rhythm like a second heartbeat. Her cart creaked through the narrow alley, filled with aluminum cans and soggy cardboard, the essentials of her survival. She had lived in the forgotten corners of this city for years, mastering how to disappear. But tonight, she found something, or someone, impossible to ignore. Near a rusted dumpster, half covered by soaked newspapers, lay a man. At first, Ivy assumed he was just another homeless soul discarded by the city. But when she looked closer, her instincts screamed otherwise. His coat, though dirty and blood-stained, was made of fine wool, something tailored and expensive. His jaw was bruised, his lips split, and on his hand, a strange platinum ring shimmered in the flickering alley light. Ivy had seen a lot of strange things, but never anything like that. He didn't speak, didn't move. His breath was shallow, ragged. "Hey," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. She should have walked away. That's what the streets taught you. Don't get involved. Don't drag trouble home. But something about the man's silence, something vulnerable and unfinished, opened a door in her heart she thought was long shut. "You're not dying in this alley," she muttered, pulling her threadbare coat from her shoulders and covering him. Dragging him into her cart was almost impossible. His weight, combined with the cold and rain, nearly broke her. But Ivy had been surviving for too long to give up now. She pushed with everything she had until the wheels began to turn. She took the narrow back path only she knew, through twisted fences and between forgotten warehouses, until they reached her shelter. It was little more than a metal shack pressed against a crumbling building, held together with rust and willpower. Inside, Ivy laid him gently on her makeshift bed, layers of tattered blankets on a wooden pallet. She lit her oil lamp, casting a soft flicker over his pale face. A gash near his temple bled slowly, mixing with rainwater. She cleaned it carefully with the little supplies she had: an old cloth, vinegar, boiled water. He groaned softly but didn't wake. "You're safe," she whispered, not knowing if it was true, not knowing if she meant it more for him or herself. She stayed by his side through the night, feeding him spoonfuls of warm broth, brushing dirt from his hair, watching his chest rise and fall like a fragile rhythm. He had no wallet, no phone, no ID, just that strange ring and the bruises that hinted at something dark. When his eyes finally opened, gray and dazed, they locked onto hers. "You're okay," she said gently. He blinked, confused, lost. "Do you know your name?" she asked. He shook his head. "Well," she said softly, "I can't keep calling you, hey you. When I was a kid, I used to read this old book about a boy named Elliot. He was brave, always helped people, even when he was scared." She paused. "Can I call you that? Until you remember who you are?" He nodded, slowly, hesitantly. "Elliot," she repeated, testing the name. "It suits you." And for the first time in a long while, Ivy didn't feel quite so alone. She had no idea what kind of man he was, where he came from, or why he had been left to die in a pile of trash. But as the candle flickered and the rain whispered outside, one thing became clear. This was no ordinary man. And this was no ordinary beginning. Ivy never meant to let anyone into her world. Her little metal shack, tucked behind a decaying warehouse, had always been a fortress of solitude, but now it held something unfamiliar. A second breath. Elliot, if that was what she would call him, lay still on the pallet bed, the flickering oil lamp casting soft shadows across his bruised face. He didn't speak much. Ivy didn't push. She understood silence too well. The next few days passed in a rhythm neither of them planned but both seemed to need. Ivy would wake early to search for recyclables, pushing her battered cart through alleys and behind restaurants. She came back with damp gloves, stiff fingers, and stale bread when she was lucky. Elliot, still weak, sat up more each day, helping in small ways, stacking blankets, organizing cans by material, adjusting the crooked table leg that had wobbled for years. But it was the little things that told Ivy who he might have been. He moved with precision. Even when folding a rag, he did it neatly, evenly, like someone trained for boardrooms, not backstreets. He had perfect posture, like his back didn't know how to slouch. Once, Ivy caught him reaching for his left wrist as if expecting a watch. And when their hands accidentally touched as she passed him a mug, he didn't flinch. He only looked at her, really looked. They didn't talk about the past. There was nothing to say, not yet. At night, Ivy lit the old stove with newspaper scraps, and Elliot watched, quiet and curious. He asked how it worked, and she explained with a shrug. Trial and error, she said. Mostly error. He smiled then, small but genuine, and it caught her by surprise. It wasn't just gratitude in his eyes, it was something more, something like awe. One evening, as rain tapped gently on the tin roof, Ivy handed him a chipped cup filled with hot tea made from herbs she had bartered for. You're healing, she said softly. I don't know who I was, Elliot replied, staring into the steam. But I feel different, like I'm not starting over, just starting. She nodded, curling up beside the stove. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. He looked at her. Why are you helping me? She didn't answer right away, then, because someone should. Because when I found you, you looked like you'd been thrown away. I know what that feels like. Their eyes met again. There was something fragile in the silence between them, something neither of them dared name. Later she watched as he fixed the radio that hadn't worked in months. His hands, though scarred and tired, moved with a certainty that memory couldn't erase. Wires, dials, fuses. He didn't just guess. He knew. How do you know how to do all this? She asked, watching him solder a broken piece of metal with a heated nail from the stove. I don't remember, he said. But my hands do. And Ivy began to wonder, who was this man before he became Elliot? Why was he lying in the trash, wearing a ring worth more than her entire year's earnings? And what would happen if, or when, he remembered? But she didn't ask, because deep down she already knew the answer would change everything. The nights in New Camden grew colder, sharper, but inside Ivy's shack, something softer had taken root. It wasn't just the heat from the stove, or the way the blankets were always shared now. It was the silence, not the kind that screamed with loneliness, but the kind that wrapped around two people like a whispered understanding. Elliot still couldn't remember who he was, but Ivy was starting to see him, not as a mystery to solve, but as a man who listened when she spoke, who noticed the way her fingers trembled when she lit the lamp, who handed her the bigger portion of a shared meal without a word. They were surviving together now, not just side by side, but with one another. One afternoon, Ivy came back with her cart half full and her hands red from the wind. She found Elliot crouched beside the old fan that had never worked. It was humming softly. She blinked. How did you? He looked up, genuinely puzzled. I'm not sure. I just knew what to do. It wasn't the first time. The door no longer screamed when opened. The radio played music some nights. The oil lamp burned steadier under his touch. He fixed things with a quiet focus, like the movements were etched into his bones. And Ivy started watching him more carefully, not because she feared him, but because she was beginning to care. She noticed the tattoo on his wrist, partly hidden under his shirt. 2 crescent moons interlocked. Elegant, symmetrical. Not the kind of thing someone from the streets would have. His coat, even after days of wear, was tailored too perfectly. And the ring she hadn't dared to pawn, the one he wore when she found him, sat quietly on the shelf, gleaming under candlelight. A black stone, heavy, inscribed inside, Alt, 1 of 2. He never asked for it back. One evening, she dared to ask the question that had been sitting between them for days. Do you ever wonder what kind of life you had before? Elliot was sitting across from her, folding the yellow edge of her cart's new handle he had fashioned out of an old pipe. He didn't look up. All the time, he said, but I'm starting to wonder if I want to go back to it. She tilted her head. Why not? He stared into the fire, then finally whispered, because whoever I was, he had everything, and he still ended up in a trash pile. The words sat between them like a truth neither of them wanted to touch. Ivy reached out just enough to let her fingers graze his. He didn't pull away. Maybe that version of you had money, she said softly. But this one has peace, maybe even a friend. Elliot looked at her then, eyes dark with something he didn't know how to name. That night, she placed a second pillow beside hers. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. They lay side by side in the dark, not touching, not speaking, just breathing in the quiet. And for the first time in years, Ivy didn't feel the need to run from morning. But even in that silence, she could feel a question tugging at the corners of her heart. What happens if he remembers? They built a rhythm, Ivy and Elliot. Days spent navigating the back streets of New Camden, her teaching, him learning. Nights wrapped in warmth and quiet, sharing everything they had and little they expected. Elliot learned quickly. He knew how to fold cardboard to triple the space in the cart, how to listen to the crinkle of plastic to tell if it was worth keeping. He could even charm the bakery owner into handing over stale bread by complimenting his cat. Ivy never asked how he adapted so well, how someone with no memory could move through the world like he had always belonged in it. But she noticed the way he carried himself, how he stood straighter than most men who'd lived in the alleys all their lives. How he always looked to the sky, like waiting for it to speak his name. And how, sometimes, he watched her like she was the only anchor to the life he couldn't remember. And then it happened. A kiss. Not dramatic, not planned. Just a moment in the soft firelight. After shared tea and a long pause. Her head had rested on his shoulder. His hand had brushed hers. And when their eyes met, there was no hesitation. Just a gentle pull like gravity, until their lips met. Brief, aching, real. And that's when everything changed. He gasped softly, his body stiffened. Ivy, he whispered, his voice suddenly distant. I think I remembered something. She pulled back, startled. What is it? He sat up, trembling. A building, the name Caldwell, and someone called me Michael. The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Michael. He stood, pacing the small shack like he didn't know where to place his hands, his body, his mind. There was a man, my brother, I think, yelling. I saw lights, heard sirens. I think, he swallowed. Someone tried to kill me. Ivy's blood ran cold. She stood slowly. Michael Caldwell? He turned, his face tight with panic. I think that's who I am. The silence that followed felt heavier than the city outside. She had always known he didn't belong to her world. His ring, his posture, his hands. They'd all whispered of something else. But knowing the truth and hearing it weren't the same. He looked at her then. A storm behind his eyes. I can't stay, Ivy. I wish I could. But whoever I was, whoever tried to destroy me, they won't stop. And I can't risk dragging you into it. She tried to steady her breath, to keep her voice from breaking. So that's it? You're just going to leave? He stepped closer, cupped her cheek. If I stay, you'll never be safe. I need to face this. That night, they didn't sleep. They lay in silence, her head on his chest, his hand tangled in her hair. The kind of silence that knows goodbye is coming. Before dawn, Michael, no longer Elliot, sat at the crate they used as a table and wrote her a letter. I don't know where I'm going or who I'll be when I get there. But you gave me a name when I had none, a home when I had nowhere to fall. You taught me that I didn't need power to be worthy of love. If I don't come back, know this. In the silence, you became everything. He left it on her pillow alongside the ring, and then he slipped out into the morning, the city swallowing him whole. When Ivy woke, there was no warmth beside her. Just a folded note and the weight of a heart beginning to crack. She didn't cry, not then. She just opened the door, stared at the city that had always taken everything from her, and whispered the only truth she had left. Elliot, Michael, come back to me. Come back to 2 months. That's how long Ivy waited. Not with hope, but with something quieter, a routine, a heartbeat she didn't know she was listening to until it stopped. Every morning, she woke in the shack, lit the fire, and stared at the spot where he used to sleep. The blanket still held the shape of his body. The ring he left behind never moved from the wooden shelf. She didn't touch it. Couldn't. The streets hadn't changed. New Camden was still cold, still cruel. Ivy went back to pushing her cart, sorting metal, avoiding stairs. The days blurred. The silence burned. Then one morning, everything cracked open. She passed by a shop window. An old television sat in the display, its screen flickering with a press conference. Ivy froze. There he was, Michael Caldwell, standing tall behind a podium, sharp black suit, clean-shaven, confident, alive. The caption beneath him read, Michael Caldwell returns as CEO of Caldwell International after mysterious absence. He spoke about business, the future, economic growth. Cameras flashed. The crowd applauded. But he didn't mention the alley. Didn't mention her. It was like he had never disappeared. Like she had never existed. Ivy stumbled back from the glass, her chest hollow. The man she had loved, fed, healed, slept beside, was now a stranger behind marble walls and designer suits. The same ring he left for her glinted on his finger. And just like that, the truth landed hard. He had chosen his world, not her. That night, the shack felt colder than ever. Ivy sat by the fire alone, reading the letter he had left behind over and over. In the silence, you became everything. The words that once made her heart ache with love now tasted like betrayal. Was it all just temporary? Was she just a safe place for him to heal before going back to his empire? She didn't cry. She couldn't. But something shifted inside her. Not hope, not yet, but a need to understand. And then days later, an envelope arrived. No return address, just her name, handwritten. Inside was a letter from Caldwell International inviting her to an executive recruitment meeting. No explanation, just a note at the bottom, scribbled in familiar handwriting. Come if you're ready to stop surviving and start becoming. MC. She almost burned it. Instead, she went. The Caldwell Tower was all glass and steel, imposing, polished, foreign. Ivy wore a thrifted blazer, her shoulders square, her eyes harder than before. She was escorted to the 27th floor. No one asked who she was, and there he stood, Michael, no tie, sleeves rolled up, the same storm gray eyes, but different, older, sharper. Hi, he said softly. She didn't smile. You sent for me like I'm a loose end you're trying to tie up. He winced, but nodded. I didn't know how else to reach you. You could have started with an apology. I know. He stepped forward. I'm offering you a position. Executive assistant. Full pay. Full benefits. No strings. No strings, she repeated coldly. I know I hurt you, he said. But you don't belong in the shadows, Ivy. You never did. Her gaze didn't waver. You left me without a word. And now you want me to color code your schedule? Michael didn't flinch. I left because I didn't know who I was, but I always knew I trusted you. Ivy crossed her arms. Fine, but let me be clear. If I take this job, that's all it is. A job. No past, no memories, no Elliot. Michael's expression fell for just a moment, but he nodded. Understood. And just like that, Ivy said yes. Not because she forgave him, but because she had questions, and she wasn't going to let him be the only one with answers. Working at Caldwell International was like stepping into a different universe. Everything was pristine, polished marble floors, chrome fixtures, a skyline view of a city that rarely looked up long enough to see the stars. Ivy didn't belong, and yet she did. She learned fast, navigated investor meetings, managed overflowing schedules, answered emails with clinical precision. Her past on the streets had taught her how to read people, to sense tension before it exploded, to think 5 steps ahead. She was unshakable, efficient, impressive. But behind closed doors, the silence between her and Michael spoke louder than any boardroom. Their offices were connected by a narrow, private hallway. Sometimes they crossed paths, accidentally. Sometimes not. When they did, they barely spoke. Just a glance, a pause, a breath held too long. He watched her like she was a painting he wasn't allowed to touch. And Ivy? She fought herself not to crumble under the weight of everything unsaid. Then came the blow. One morning, Ivy arrived to find her keycard deactivated. Her desk was sealed. Security met her at the elevator. You're under internal investigation, they said. For breach of data, corporate misconduct. Her heart stopped. In a sterile conference room, HR slid a folder toward her. Inside, emails she'd never written. Login timestamps she'd never made. Reports bearing her digital signature, leaked to Caldwell's competitors. She blinked at the lies printed in ink. I didn't do any of this, she whispered. The HR manager's voice was rehearsed. We're following protocol, effective immediately. You're terminated. Ivy's throat closed. Where's Michael? He's been placed on leave, they replied. Mr. Marcus Caldwell is acting CEO. Marcus, Michael's brother. The man Ivy had only seen once in passing. Smile too tight, handshake too firm. She remembered thinking he looked like a mirror without a reflection. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She left the tower in Sion, her dignity wrapped tight around her like armor. That night, Michael found her, sitting on the cracked step outside the old warehouse she once called home. I trusted you, she said without looking up. I trusted them, he replied quietly. When she turned to face him, she saw it, the unraveling, the edges of a man being torn apart from the inside. I never doubted you, he said, voice trembling. But the moment I defended you, they turned on me too. Said I was compromised, that I let personal feelings interfere. So they took everything from both of us, she said flatly. Michael nodded. Marcus orchestrated it. I know it, but I have no proof. Ivy clenched her fists. Then I'll find it. His eyes met hers. You don't owe me anything. I'm not doing it for you, she said. I'm doing it because I refuse to let a man like Marcus write the end of my story. And just like that, the girl from the streets became the woman they never saw coming. Over the next week, Ivy worked from the shadows. She contacted Mara, an IT analyst who had once admired her calm under pressure. Together, they dug. And what they found was damning. Faked login records, a phantom server Marcus had full access to, forged emails traced back to an internal IP. Even security footage had been altered, but not perfectly. In one instance, Ivy's badge pinged into a server room at 2:13 a.m., but her phone's GPS said she was 2 miles away. The final nail? A hidden folder with forged documents. Ivy wasn't the only one Marcus planned to eliminate. She was just the first. Ivy didn't ask permission. She leaked everything, directly to the board, to Michael, and anonymously to the press. The fallout was swift and brutal. Marcus denied everything. Then the files went public, and no amount of charm could clean the blood off his tailored cuffs. Michael found her again, this time in the quiet corner of a cafe where she had taken a part-time job to stay afloat. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, a formal apology from the board, a reinstatement offer, and a check with enough zeros to start a new life. Ivy pushed it back. "I don't want your money," she said. Michael looked at her, eyes full of pain and something deeper. "Then what do you want?" She stared out of the window. Her voice was quiet. "I don't know yet, but when I do, I'll choose for myself." She stood, turned to leave, and behind her Michael whispered, "I hope I'm still someone worth choosing." Marcus Caldwell was arrested days later. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder. The headlines exploded. Caldwell International distanced itself. And Michael? He disappeared from the spotlight again. But this time, not into the streets. He stepped down as CEO, quietly. No press tour, just one simple press conference, standing under the company's steel phoenix emblem. "I've spent my life chasing power, thinking it would give me purpose. But I lost myself in that chase, and I only found who I truly was when I had nothing. And someone saw me anyway." Cameras flashed. Reporters gasped when he announced his resignation. But Ivy didn't need to watch it. She already knew. Weeks passed. Ivy opened a small cafe on a quiet corner, one filled with warmth, books, and the scent of cinnamon. She named it La Brisa. Breathe and begin. It was peaceful, imperfect, and hers. Then one afternoon, he walked in. No entourage, no suit, just rolled sleeves and that same quiet look he wore the first time she found him. In his hand, a small velvet box. He placed it gently on the counter. Opened it. Inside, a delicate silver bracelet, inscribed, "With you, always." Ivy didn't cry. She just whispered, "You left everything." Michael nodded. "Because none of it meant anything without you. You didn't have to give it all up." "I did," he said. "Because I finally want to give something real. Not promises. Just presence." And that day she stepped from behind the counter, took his hand and chose him. Not the billionaire, not the CEO. Just the man. Weeks turned into months. Michael adjusted surprisingly well to cafe life. He learned how to steam milk, organize deliveries, and write chalkboard menus with shaky handwriting. He didn't complain. Not once. Ivy teased him endlessly when he mixed up espresso shots and chai syrup. They didn't need fancy things. They had shared mornings, shared glances, shared peace. But something still tugged at Ivy's heart. Something unfinished. Aaron, her little brother, the boy she'd lost to the system years ago, the one she raised like a son until the world tore them apart. Michael never asked. He didn't have to. He saw the way she stared at the worn letters tucked behind the register. He saw the quiet ache in her eyes every time she heard a teenage voice pass by. So, without telling her, he started searching. He visited shelters, followed paper trails, asked questions. And one day, he found him. 15. Quiet, hardened, suspicious. But when Michael handed him one of Ivy's old notes, faded, torn, but legible, the boy froze. "No matter where you are, I'll find you. You are not forgotten. Ivy." Aaron stared at the paper for a long time, then folded it like treasure. 2 mornings later, Ivy was arranging books behind the counter when the bell over the door chimed. She looked up and froze. There, in the doorway, stood a boy with her eyes. Worn shoes, a crumpled note in his hand. "I think," he said quietly, "this belongs to you." Her knees gave out before the tears did. She ran, wrapped him in her arms, and cried for everything that had come home. Aaron didn't speak for a long moment, then whispered, "You took your time." "I never stopped looking," she sobbed. That night, the cafe stayed open late. Aaron sat at the corner table, a plate of pastries in front of him. Ivy fussed, nervous and radiant. Michael leaned over to whisper, "She makes too much food when she's overwhelmed." Aaron smirked. "She talks a lot, too." Michael laughed. "She's waited a long time to say everything." A pause. Aaron looked up. "Are you her boyfriend or something?" Michael smiled. "Something like that." "Are you going to leave?" Michael met his gaze and answered simply, "No." A week later, Ivy hung a new photo on the wall, the three of them, smiling, messy, whole. Below it, a plaque read, "Family is what always finds its way back." And each morning, as the sun poured in through the cafe windows, Ivy passed that photo, touched it gently, and smiled. Because in the end, the love they built wasn't born of fairy tales or flawless timing. It was made of late nights, second chances, scars, and the brave, quiet decision to stay.